Week 17 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few tight ends I look to get on the waiver wire heading into championship weekend for owners. So if you made it, congratulations. And time recording this video, none of these tight ends are on the COVID list as of now, and hopefully don't go on it. The first guy I look to get this week's Gerald Everett of the Seattle Seahawks. I've mentioned Everett over the last few weeks as a waiver wire pickup, and he's definitely producing and one of the big targets right now for Russell Wilson, and one of the only guys he's been trusting and been consistent. So the last few weeks here for Everett. Week 14 at Houston, a carry, 13 yards, 2 catches, 15 yards, and a touchdown. Week 15 at the Rams, 4 catches, 60 yards. And Week 16 versus the Bears, 4 catches, 68 yards, and a touchdown. So right here, another good matchup for him in Week 17 versus the Lions. I give up the 15th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And Everett right now, he's available in 58% of fantasy leagues. Like I mentioned, he's a good target for Wilson, big target in the red zone, and he's been finding the end zone as well. So I definitely would give him a pickup this week on the wire. The next tight end I look to get is Trevin Jordan of the Houston Texans. So I've mentioned Trevin Jordan a few times over the last few weeks here, and he came off a decent PPR game, 4 catches, 56 yards in the victory versus the Chargers. So the last few games here for the rookie Jordan: Week 14 versus Seattle, 4 catches, 26 yards, and a touchdown. Week 15 at Jacksonville, he didn't get targeted in that ball game, and you had the goose egg. In Week 16 versus the Chargers, like I mentioned, 4 catches, 56 yards. So right here, Week 17, tough matchup on paper at San Francisco that gives up the 4th least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. But right here, Jordan, he's been going out there. He's been making some plays. Him and Davis Mills have a decent rapport, in my opinion. And right now, with a slow week at the tight end position, not many options to get off the wire. I think Trevin Jordan's a decent one, and he's available in 99% of fantasy leagues. The next tight end is James OShaughnessy of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I've mentioned him as a pickup over the last couple weeks here, is O'Shaughnessy, and he's put up some decent numbers. Dan Arnold was pretty good until he had to be out for the season with his injury for Jacksonville. And Trevor Lawrence, the one thing I know this season, he definitely likes targeting and passing the ball to the tight end. Week 14 at Tennessee, 4 catches, 21 yards. Week 15 versus Houston, 4 catches, 60 yards. And Week 16 at the New York Jets, 4 catches, 49 yards. So right here, he's had 7 or more fantasy points in the last 3 PPR days here for O'Shaughnessy. So right here, Week 17 in New England, tough matchup, no doubt about it. They give up the least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. But right here, like I mentioned, it's a slow week at the tight end position. Not many options of guys that are going to do much. And at least this guy's getting targets and putting up some decent points. And right now, he's available in 97% of fantasy leagues. The next tight end is Foster Monroe of the Las Vegas Raiders. So Monroe, he's been a decent fill-in for Waller. And I doubt Waller's going to come back now with 2 games left here in the regular season, even though I know this Raider team still has an outside shot of making the playoffs in the AFC. So the last few games here, filling in for Waller. Week 14 at Kansas City, 3 catches, 13 yards. Week 15 at the Cleveland Browns, 7 catches, 65 yards. And Week 16 versus Denver, 4 catches, 67 yards. So right here, Week 17 at the Colts, a great matchup for Monroe. The Colts give up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And right here, as long as Waller's out, he's a definite pickup, is Monroe, in my opinion. And he's available right now in 78% of fantasy leagues. In the 5th and final tight end I look to get Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. So Kmet, it's been an up and down second season here for him with this Bear team. But the last few weeks here, he's been pretty productive. Week 14 at Green Bay, 3 catches, 17 yards. Week 15 versus Minnesota, 6 catches, 71 yards. And Week 16 at the Seattle Seahawks, 4 catches, 49 yards. So right here, Week 17 versus the Giants, pretty good matchup. Giants give up the 14th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And Kmet right now, he's widely available in 67% of fantasy leagues. I know Justin Fields most likely is going to come back in this ball game here in Week 17, but I think Kmet could still be a decent option. Big target in the red zone, and he's a guy that's gone out there and had a few decent games. So that's a few tight ends I look to get on the waiver wire for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.